bunch of information. Tim Brando joins us. We haven't had him on in too long. Fox Sports. Tim, your thoughts? Is Jay Monahan, is he going to somehow survive all this?
If he does, then he is the new Teflon Don of all of sports. I mean, that's when you consider the holier than thou representation that he delivered upon the announcement of LIV and disallowing any of their players from participating in PGA Tour events, and then really allowing the players that he needed desperately to stay with him, guys like Jordan Spieth and Justin Thomas, particularly Rory McIlroy, to become sort of the pit bulls, if you will, of defending the sanctity of the PGA Tour, all the while with clearly conversations that were ongoing, clearly while he was in conversations with the people from LIV to have this announcement made under the cloak of secrecy through CNBC. I can't imagine how he survives, but he may. In today's world, David, you just you never know. Everybody's speaking out of both sides of their mouths, and it would appear that loyalty at the highest levels of sports and heck, corporate America has gone out the window. Mercenaries, all just it's amazing. The things that we see today. If I'm a player that's ranked somewhere between 90 and 100 and 120, and I remain faithful to the PGA Tour, and I'm hoping, particularly if I'm in that area between 115 and 120, 125, and I want to hold on to my card, all that just changed, and the rank and file here are just absolutely getting screwed in the PGA Tour. I know the fans, for the most part, and to some extent maybe the television executives care more about the star players, the ones that are drawing cards for tournaments that we see on television. And we'll see plenty of them, and they'll all, you can make a case that today's news is for the greater good of golf overall. But it's certainly not good news for the rank and file of the PGA Tour. I mean, not at all.
Tim, I feel genuinely bad for anybody, like you mentioned, Rory McIlroy, but especially the guys on the middle or lower end that could have taken big paydays and said, look, I'm not doing that. I don't want that money. And then not only do their whole sacrifice financially get thrown back in their face, but now they have to take that money because this deal was all made, without their knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. And someone said something to me today on Twitter about Greg Norman, and he was clearly not a fan and loathed all things Greg Norman as a player. Therefore, saw him as a cancer within golf because he set up LIV the way he did. He's clearly going to give up his position of power, and he may have wanted to destroy the PGA. I don't think that's the case, but he may. Some fans hated Greg that much in the aftermath of it, and some former players did too. But I mean, now you look at what he did, and he allowed the players, all of them, through what he was doing with LIV Golf, to get all the things they wanted. They could play only a few tournaments, which they cut back their schedules. He got them guaranteed money, so they didn't have to worry about empty trips by not making cuts. Those are all things that players have always wanted. Going all the way back to the late 70s, early 80s, they wanted to get some money to defray the cost of appearing. The appearance costs themselves, just getting there, is costly for an independent contractor. Well, he got rid of all that and got them guaranteed money. And now look, he's now gotten a merger to make the game more global, which I think was the big picture thought process all along. and he took those hits about blood money and Saudi this and all of that, and he comes out of this thing at the very least, even though he may no longer be involved because of the merger. He comes out of this looking like an innovative mind that was thinking big picture at a time when other players did not. And Mickelson's had this battle going on social media with Brando Chambly, who took a real hard stance and way over the top, holier than thou, condescending view of all things not PGA. And, as a partner, as a television partner to the PGA Tour, how does NBC and the Golf Channel look? And particularly Brando look through all this? I mean, they're out on an island now by themselves.
He, in fact, spoke today and called it maybe the worst day of professional golf. He looked stunned, like he had not slept. That remains to be seen about how will he continue to work there, or will that be hypocritical, or what? How does the commissioner, how does he not let anyone know? Is he worried about leaks? How does Rory McIlroy, who's really not played well for a couple of months since the Masters, who has been out there taking most of the battering, how does this happen?
Well, that's a great. I mean, that is really my focus is that Justin Thomas, Jordan Spieth, certainly Rory, more so than either one of them, but still all of them. Those are the guys he went to hold firm and hold steady with the majority of the tour. And these are all good young guys, really the next generation of golf. And they were loyal. Look at the hundreds of millions of dollars that they turned down. And for what? Given this decision, for what? I mean, those are opportunities missed. And I said all along, and a lot of my liberal friends in media took shots even at me for not condemning LIV Golf. I actually said I watched it. I was interested in looking at it. Frankly, I didn't like it. I thought it was a hard watch. The team thing, the graphics, all of that, unrecognizable voices other than David Faraday calling it. I was not impressed with the television presentation of it, but I did admit to watching it. And I had some of my liberal friends in media say, what are you doing that for? How dare you do that? Don't you know about the bloodline? I'm like, wait a minute. What happened with the NBA? What happened with Nike? What happened with how many other corporations that are out there that sold their souls to communist China? We have one set of rules for, these people versus those people. And, we can all take our shots all you want. You look at a guy like Brooks Koepka, by example. If you watch the Netflix series Full Swing, as I did, I thought it was a wonderful documentary on golf. And they were doing this documentary right at the height of the LIV announcement taking place. And Koepka was in a mental dungeon. He had been hurt. He came off as vulnerable. And I found myself sort of rooting for him to win the PGA. I mean, I did because of what he went through. And unlike Mickelson, he was not wearing, his team's shirt or hat. He was really just Brooks, representing Brooks, playing the game. He had Nike wear on, I think, as a sponsor that stayed with him. And that's the other thing, all the sponsorship money that left these players. For what? How do they look now? But bottom line is, those guys that made that choice, that made that decision, they did so because the team thing they thought would help their so-called rank and file. There are a lot of guys that are playing on LIV that are not superstars, but they're making a lot of money, and they love playing the team game, and it's rejuvenated them. Streelman was one example of that, who loves to play team events. I think he won in New Orleans at that team event not long ago, a couple of years ago maybe, with Keegan Bradley. And Streelman was talking about that today on PGA Tour Radio, and I caught a little bit of that on Sirius earlier today. The players love that part of it, the team thing. I don't think fans necessarily do or they don't understand it. But look, ultimately, fellas, I think this is good for golf. For the people that consume it, love it, and enjoy watching it. Now we're going to see more of the best players competing against one another, and that had been taken away because of this hard stance that the PGA Tour had taken against LIV.
Tim Brando, Fox Sports, with us on 365 Sports.
Tim, as we hurtle through the month of June and the slow times in college football, it does appear that, realignment is going to have to be, it doesn't appear, it's going to have to be dealt with one way or the other. When it comes to the Pac-12, you've stated on this show before that a way forward for the Pac-12 is going to be rocky at best, with Colorado kind of Rick George saying they're going to do what's best for them ultimately. How do you feel it stands now with where Colorado and other teams in the Pac-12 are looking into the future when it comes to their media deal and where they should be going forward?
Well, I mean, my view of it is the clock is ticking, and we're now late in the fourth quarter, and you can't be playing field position football. You got to be taking deep shots. You got to be going for the home run pitch. And we're not far from Hail Mary time for George Kliavkoff, okay? I mean, let's not forget that USC-UCLA announcement to the Big Ten happened when?
A year ago, yeah.
It happened 4th of July weekend is when it happened. And you can bet that the wheels are turning everywhere in terms of when and where these announcements have got to be made, because at some point the schools themselves, before they get into fall camp, they have to know what their immediate future is beyond just the season administratively. They have to have an understanding from a scheduling standpoint, what direction they're going to be going in. And I think the doors are open at Brett Yormark's office, fellas. I think you know that. Mm-hmm. I know that. And I think all the administrators there at schools that I think are in their line of sight, which would be, those schools on each corner of the Pac-12, the northern and the southern tier. And with Colorado, in my opinion, comes Utah. Whatever the political issue might be between Utah and BYU, that's got to be worked on. Maybe that's what they are working on. I don't know. Utah's a tremendous get to go along with BYU. I mean, it is. But there may be some, political hangover from those two schools with one another. I think they just have to learn to deal with that. Utah is a proud program now. That's the two-time defending champion of the Pac-12. And adding them would be a good thing to go along with Colorado on one end. And Arizona State, in my view, would coalesce and to the idea of joining them. I see all four of them going to the Big 12. And with that in play, and I don't know what the time situation is for the presidents of the Big Ten or what their big picture is, but I do know Tony Petitti well, and I really trust his leadership skills, and I think that he'll take a big picture look and listen to his presidents. And if those presidents in the Big Ten decide that, from a financial point of view, from a scheduling point of view, having Oregon and Washington in their league would make some sense, then I think the potential is there for that to happen. I don't think that's necessarily something television necessarily has to happen, has to see. I don't know that Oregon and Washington make the television deal any better for the three networks involved. The suits would have to answer to that. I think, frankly, Oregon has been a banner carrier for the conference during the period in which USC was down. Okay, so, and they're a national program now. They are. Washington's been up and down, but they're on their way back. They had a very good back half of last season. And I think from an AAU rating standpoint, it makes sense to the Big Ten. But it could help them from a cost standpoint on travel, particularly for the non-revenue producing sports, if they were to bring them in. I think the potential of all that happening is right there.
I know Craig has an SEC question, Tim. I got one more on what you're talking about. If, in fact, the Big 12 expands, what we've been told, and it does seem to be from good people, is that if, in fact, they were to expand with the two or more, that Fox And ESPN would prorate that, and that nobody would lose money who's a part of whatever remains of the Big 12 when Texas and Oklahoma leave. Have you heard that?
No, I've not, but I wouldn't shout that notion down either. Okay, I wouldn't. I've not had any conversations with anyone on the football front recently. I've been on vacation, just got back from there.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have our seminar at Fox in another month. I think July 6th and 7th. I'm headed out to Terranea in California, where we have our meetings each year for both the NFL and college football. But that's certainly as a rumor. It's not a rumor that I would shout down at this stage.
Tim, I know that you had a lot of strong opinions on the SEC and their scheduling, I guess, stalemate that occurred last week. I was just curious, not so much from was it a mistake, but is this the first time you've seen the SEC kind of have a misstep in what seems like quite a while? It just feels like pretty much everything they do turns to gold, and this is the first time where it's almost like, oh wow, they're kind of human too.
Well, I think it's really unfortunate that the commissioner of the SEC, Greg Sankey, failed to be the leader that we all feel he is in this particular respect. I mean, this guy is carrying with him the label strongest leader in college football. And, when Kevin Warren stepped down, that was an easy statement to make. And as I've said, and I said with my tweet a day or two ago, much is required from those that are given much, and the SEC has given much, it's taken much, and much is required. And I thought he really was lacking transparency. I thought he sent the media down this primrose lane for 15 months, saying we're going to go to 9. He even sent out through his offices who the primary teams would be that they would play. So much so that apparently it got Nick Saban's attention, because Saban for the first time wants 8 as opposed to 9, because his guaranteed opponents by rivalry would be LSU, Tennessee, and the potential of playing both of those to go along with Georgia were problematic, apparently.
Yeah.
And so now he's backing off. It's sad when you see that. And so, yeah, I pointed it out, and I'm not alone. There are a lot of other people in media that had some blowback on this, because it certainly lacked transparency. Now they're trying to, through his minions, of which my friend Paul Feinbaum is one. They're saying, "Oh, it's just a one-off. But next year we'll take care of it. We'll get it up to 9." That was because by that time Texas and Oklahoma are in it. Well, okay, that may be true, but why did you sell us this bill of goods and then pull back within a short period of time? The reason is because the commissioner decided to yield power to presidents of schools that just want to get bowl eligible. Okay. This has nothing to do with the power schools that are going to be contending for the playoff every year, but going to and staying with 8 is going to be a problem for the SEC if they keep it in play once we go to 12. Because then you're going to be measuring, and I don't care what metric you use. The conference in and of itself is not good enough, even with all of its championships and even with all of its crystals and its recent history. It's not good enough to have a 9-3 team that's got one power conference non-conference game on it, and you're playing FCS schools in mid to late November when you're measuring that against the 9-3 Big Ten team that's playing 9 conference games and would have played a 10th in their title game. I mean, that was my point. And this notion that being critical of anyone in a position of Commissioner Sankey somehow makes you, a terrible human being. How dare you go after our commissioner? I was just simply making an observation that I felt was true. He looked very uncommissioner-like last week. And this is the guy that's supposed to be the most powerful man in college football. I've known Greg Sankey a long time. I knew him when he was at the Southland Conference. I have great respect for him. His background, however, is that of a bureaucrat that was on the infractions committee of the NCAA, as well as the former conference commissioner with the Southland before Mike Slide brought him in. I've got respect for him. I was very disappointed in him, and I expressed that. I don't think there's anything terribly wrong with that. Like I said, there are others that have taken their shots on this too.
Tim, I just think that ultimately Greg Sankey's message needs to them is like, listen, the 12th team is going to be way more important than who gets to play in the Poinsettia Bowl.
Exactly. And in the same conversation that he was having with Paul Feinbaum, and this was the reason I said what I did, it was like frothing at the mouth. Paul, who had the answer, okay, those presidents wanted more money. And they wanted ESPN to dole out more money for the ninth game. Well, clearly they're oblivious to the economy of sports television right now. And by the way, that deal was done. It was brokered 4.5 years ago. All right. So, and by the way, it was never up for bid. Fox, CBS, and nobody got to bid on that. That was a deal he just decided to do on his own. Well, now, the company I work for cuts the deal with NBC and CBS for the Big Ten to be on over-the-air networks from noon until almost midnight, and they're making $1 billion. They're going to make more money per team than the SEC is, and yet he wants ESPN to bail them out with more money. They haven't even started that TV deal yet. I mean, come on. At some point, you got to admit to that. You got to let's just tell the truth. The presidents wanted more money. ESPN's not willing to give it. When they are, then maybe we'll get to 9 games. Just tell us the truth. That was my point.
Yeah,
and a little transparency would have been nice, but he chose not to do it. And and for those that want to protect the mighty SEC, I love the SEC. I wouldn't be where I am today without the time I spent covering the Southeastern Conference, both at ESPN and at CBS. It has nothing to do with conference affiliations, and I'm a friend of Paul's. I don't dislike Paul at all. But if he wants to come after me, then he can come on all he wants. If he's going to be the pit bull for the commissioner, bring it, big fella. I'm just going to say what I see. I've always said that, whether I worked at ESPN or CBS. I said what I saw, and I'll not stop doing that.
Which is why we love you having on the show with a lot going on today and a lot in college football. Tim, hope you had a great vacation. Hit them straight at Southern Trace whenever you play there next, and we always appreciate your time.
You got it, fellas. Always a pleasure being on, and there will be some news. Mr. Yormark, I think, is going to be he's going to be the guy to keep an eye on between now and the 4th of July.
Tim Brando, Fox Sports, with us on 365 Sports, an almost weekly go-to with us in college football, and we appreciate, as always, his opinion and his honesty. And doesn't mean you have to agree with him.